He was called by the FBI the most prolific and most cold-blooded serial killer in America. He claimed that over the past 35 years, he had killed 93 people in 19 different U.S. states. He drew portraits of dozens of his victims and smiled as he confessed to all the details of his crimes. An officer involved in the investigation stated that many police officers, in their entire careers, only get to witness a true demon a few times. When looking into his eyes, it was like seeing pure evil. Hello everyone, and welcome to the channel. I'm DarkCaseX. We've told many stories about serial killers, but the one we're discussing today is a bit different. Its time span, geographical range, number of victims, and vicious nature are rarely seen. So what exactly happened back then? And how did decades of crime manage to evade police detection? Let's travel back to 1940 to review the details of the case together. Georgia is located in the southeastern United States and was one of the 13 original colonies during the American Revolution. Its capital is Atlanta. In the past, it was known for producing peaches, earning it the nickname the Peach State. The world's largest beverage company, Coca-Cola, was born here. And the demon we are talking about today was also born here. Samuel Little was born on June 7, 1940, in the state of Georgia. His birth was considered an accident. His mother was a 16-year-old sex worker, and his father was one of her clients. They had an encounter, and he was conceived by accident. No one anticipated Little's birth, and no one cared about him. His mother, struggling to survive, couldn't take care of him, so she sent the young Little to his grandmother in Ohio. It is said his grandmother also despised him and neglected him. The most she did was give him food. This lack of discipline turned Little completely into a feral child. Coupled with living at the very bottom of society, he was exposed daily to either fighting and brawling or swindling and deceit. The so-called Little learned fighting skills from a young age, and his shoplifting skills became masterful. At school, his mind was never on his studies. He was always fighting with classmates and bullying the weak. In 1956, 16-year-old Little was caught stealing a bicycle and was sent to a juvenile detention center. This was the first time he was caught. After this, Little completely let himself go. After his release, Little continued down the path of crime. In 1961, he was arrested again for theft. This time, because he was already an adult, he could not escape the law. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison. During this time, Little learned various criminal skills from the other inmates, which included boxing. This also foreshadowed the killings to come. After finishing his sentence, Little decided to go to Florida to find his mother. His mother already disliked this son, and now he was always committing crimes. Naturally, his mother wouldn't treat him well, and Little hated his mother even more. To be precise, it was resentment. He blamed his mother for giving birth to him only to abandon him. Therefore, the relationship between this mother and son was extremely poor. With no education, no work experience, and a prison record, it wasn't easy for Little to find work. To make a living, he could only do manual labor. Fortunately, Little was sturdily built and skilled in boxing. He often worked in cemeteries, digging graves for money. Of course, this hard-earned money meant nothing to someone accustomed to theft and fraud. He simply looked down on it. What he preferred was money that came effortlessly. So over the next 10+ years, Little rampaged across 11 U.S. states, stealing, robbing, and swindling, stopping at nothing. During this period, many women lost their lives at his hands. The cunning Little would usually commit a crime and then move to a new location. But he didn't always get away. He was caught 26 times, but mostly received short-term detentions, and was then released. This was because the police had not connected him to the murders. Time flies, and soon it was 1982. On September 12th of that year, Police in Florida discovered the body of 26-year-old Patricia M. Mount. Then in October, the body of 22-year-old Melinda Lepre was found in Mississippi. After investigation, 2 sex workers provided a crucial lead. They said they saw Melinda get into a man's car. She was killed shortly after. That same man had also allegedly attacked them. In November, Little was arrested for theft in Mississippi. The police discovered that he closely matched the description of the man given by the 2 witnesses. However, before the grand jury could file an indictment, Little was extradited to Florida. This was because police discovered that the death of Mount in Florida was also linked to Little. A witness said they had seen Little and Mount together. Mount disappeared the next day. Police indeed found hairs belonging to Little on Mount's body, but Little insisted he was innocent. He initially said he didn't know Mount, but later changed his story, saying he did know her. He claimed Mount had danced with him at a bar, and the hair must have transferred then, although this sounded like a lie. In the absence of direct evidence, the court ultimately had to release Little. Having escaped justice, Little was overjoyed. Fearing complications if he stayed, he immediately fled to San Diego, California. However, in his vocabulary, the word restraint did not exist. So he continued to commit crimes. In October 1984, Little was arrested by the police again. This time, a 22-year-old woman named Lori Barros reported him. She said she had been allegedly kidnapped and assaulted by Little and had barely survived. When the police arrested Little, they found an unconscious woman in his trunk. This time, the evidence was undeniable. Little couldn't argue and could only admit to false imprisonment and assaulting the 2 women. He was sentenced to 4 years in prison. In February 1987, after serving only 2.5 years in prison, Little was paroled. This time, he fled to Los Angeles. In Los Angeles, Little escalated his activities, becoming even more frenzied. On July 13th, 1987, the body of Carol Alford was found in a secluded alley in Los Angeles. On August 14th, the body of Audrey Nelson was found in a dumpster in downtown Los Angeles. On September 3rd, the body of Guadalupe Apodaca was found by police in an abandoned garage in Los Angeles. These 3 victims suffered similar fates. They were first beaten and then strangled to death. Their bodies were then dumped in streets and alleys. Police suspected the killer was the same person. This was, of course, all Little's doing. In reality, the number of victims was far more than 3. Little killed at least 10 people in Los Angeles. But because most of the victims were sex workers and drug addicts, these people had few friends, and their families were not around, so they could be missing for a long time before anyone noticed. Moreover, the deaths of these marginalized people were usually not taken seriously by the police. Many were even ruled as deaths from overdose on illicit substances without further investigation. In the following years, from 1990 to 2012, Little continued to wreak havoc in multiple U.S. states, committing heinous acts. He was arrested by the police multiple times, but always for lesser crimes like theft, drunk driving, or possession of illicit substances. So he was usually jailed for a short time and then released. On September 5, 2012, Little was arrested again in Kentucky. It was unknown how many times he had been arrested by this point. Police found illicit substances on him. He was later extradited to California to stand trial and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. Such a short sentence meant nothing to Little. After all, he was all too familiar with prison, how to follow the rules, be obedient, and get time off for good behavior. He knew better than anyone. He believed it wouldn't be long before he'd be free and enjoying life again. But this time, he miscalculated, because the Los Angeles Police Department had established a cold case special unit. At that time, the Los Angeles archives had thousands of cold cases to process, most of them left over from the 1980s and 90s. The social environment was chaotic back then, but as DNA technology matured, the unit began extracting DNA from past cold cases and comparing it with DNA in the database. Good news came from the cold case unit. Little's DNA matched the suspicious DNA found on Audrey Nelson, who was murdered in August 1989. Matched. And this was just the beginning. Then, the suspicious DNA from two other Los Angeles victims, Carol Elford and Guadalupe Apodaca, also belonged to Little. In September 2014, Little was charged with the murders of 3 people in Los Angeles. After a trial lasting several weeks, he was sentenced to 3 life terms without the possibility of parole. At this point, this evil-doing demon was finally locked away for good. But by this time, Little was already a 74-year-old man. Over the past 50-plus years, he had committed crimes in 19 U.S. states and been arrested by police over 100 times. He was sentenced to prison multiple times, but his total prison time did not exceed 10 years. Normally, someone with such an extensive criminal record should have been flagged as a person of interest by the police. However, in the early days, information was not shared between states, which is why the police had never paid much attention to him. Although sentenced to life imprisonment, Little maintained his innocence from beginning to end, claiming he was innocent and had not harmed those women. He also refused to cooperate with the police and would not disclose any details. Subsequently, the FBI's investigation uncovered a shocking fact. In multiple states across the U.S., similar cases had been found. The victims were all women from the bottom of society, and the causes of death were basically the same. First beaten, then strangled. There were no wounds caused by sharp objects on their bodies. Coincidentally, when those women were killed, Little was active in the states where the women were. Therefore, the FBI suspected he was responsible for all of them. But it was only suspicion. There was no hard evidence. Until one person appeared, who successfully made Little talk and unearthed the shocking hidden secret from beneath the surface. Officer James Holland. He was a very skilled interrogator. He had previously made several tight-lipped killers talk. He was adept at grasping a criminal's psychology and then tailoring his approach to break down their psychological defenses. James knew that in Texas, a 38-year-old woman named Denise was killed in 1994, and Little was in Texas at that time. Judging by the MO, it was highly likely Little's work. So James personally went to the prison in California, preparing to have a talk with Little. Initially, Little, as always, refused to talk. However, James understood. He knew that serial killers like him are usually very arrogant. You can't use force. You must first find common ground with him, and then gradually pry open his mouth. During the conversation, Little said he disliked being called a sex offender. James went along with him, calling him a true killer. Little seemed to enjoy this title. James seized the opportunity to continue chatting with him, closing the distance. After learning that Little was good at drawing, James praised him as an artist. This made him very pleased. Under James's guidance, Little gradually began to brag about his glorious achievements. When talking about the victim in Texas, Little mentioned the victim's height, her appearance, the fact that she wore dentures, and other details. These details matched the police database records exactly. Unquestionably, Little was responsible for many more cases. To get him to confess to all his crimes, James came up with a plan. At that time, Little was already 78 years old and suffering from diabetes and high blood pressure. James guessed that for someone already serving a life sentence, avoiding the death penalty and having a good prison environment would be enough. Therefore, James requested his extradition to Texas. This would give them more time to talk. Additionally, he reached an agreement with the prosecutor. No matter how many murders Little confessed to, he would not receive the death penalty. When Little was transferred to the prison in Texas, he was very satisfied with the prison conditions. Coupled with not facing the death penalty, He became very cooperative. He confessed all his past crimes to James. Over the next year and a half, totaling about 700 hours, Little detailed the various crimes he had committed over the past several decades. Unexpectedly, this large, rough-looking man had an exceptionally good memory. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say he had a photographic memory, because even though some cases were decades old, but regarding the various details of the victims and the crime process, he remembered everything very clearly and could even draw them. Little drew dozens of portraits of his victims. The drawings were very detailed. For example, hairstyle, makeup, what jewelry they wore, names, and ages were all very clear. Little recalled that in 1971, in Miami, he met an 18 or 19-year-old black woman named Marion. She was 5 feet 6 to 5 feet 7 tall and weighed about 140 pounds. They met at a bar. He later killed her near Highway 27 and dumped her body in a pond near the highway. In 1984, at a strip club in Ohio, he met a 25-year-old white woman. She was between 5 feet 6 and 5 feet 7 tall, with short blonde hair and blue eyes. The woman wanted to hitch a ride with him to Miami. Later, when the car reached northern Kentucky, he strangled her in the back seat and buried her body on a small hill. In 1993, in Las Vegas, he met a black woman in her 40s. She was about 5 feet 5 tall and weighed no more than 121 pounds. Although she had short hair, she wore a long wig. He took the woman to a nearby motel and strangled her. He eventually put the body in his car trunk and drove to the suburbs to dump the body. In 1982, at a club in New Orleans, he met a black woman, 30 to 40 years old. She was about 5 feet 8 tall and weighed over 150 pounds, wearing a very beautiful dress at the time. After meeting at the club, the woman took a ride in his car to go home. Instead, he drove the car to a riverbank and killed the woman by the river. There were many, many more such recollections, Little vividly described. His criminal process, he remembered every detail. While saying these things, his face was full of excitement and pride, without a trace of remorse. Little said watching those women slowly take their last breath made him happy. The women fought back hard, fighting for their lives, and he was fighting for his pleasure. What shocked the police even more was that Little said that between 1970 and 2005, he had killed a total of 93 people. This number was far greater than the most prolific serial killer known to the police up to that point. When Little said these things, it was as if he was showing off his trophies. This sent a chill down the spines of the police. After investigation, it was confirmed that at least 60 people died at Little's hands. This made him the most prolific serial killer in American history. The FBI believes all of Little's confessions are credible. But considering the time span and geographical scope of the crimes were extremely large, and the victims' identities were hard to trace, many bodies were never found. The remaining 33 victims may never be identified. According to the investigation, Little's first murder can probably be traced back to around 1970. Over the next 35 years, he killed indiscriminately. Some may wonder, how did Little commit so many murders in as many as 19 states across the U.S. without ever being caught? In fact, it wasn't that Little's methods were so sophisticated, he was just lucky. First, Little's chosen targets were almost exclusively marginalized people at the bottom of society, such as sex workers, drug users, homeless individuals, and so on. And most were black women. These people received little attention. After they disappeared, it was sometimes a long time before anyone knew. By the time the bodies were found, the clues were long gone. In addition, the police didn't pay much attention to these marginalized people. They would often just find an excuse to close the case. Second, Little's method of killing was unique. He never used sharp weapons, like knives or axes. He relied only on his hands to knock down the victims and kill them barehanded, so there were few wounds on the victims' bodies. Days later, no clues could be found on the remains. Finally, Little operated all over the country. After committing a crime in one state, he would immediately flee to another state. At that time, information was not networked and couldn't be shared. This led to Little, a man with numerous priors, not being flagged as a person of interest by the police. So he was arrested many times and released many times. Little's MO was very direct. He had a car and could travel freely across all U.S. states. Coincidentally, he had lived at the bottom of society since childhood and was very familiar with these kinds of people. He knew exactly how to get close to them. After gaining their trust, he would drive to a secluded place and attack them in the back seat. He was a boxer. So often with one punch, the victim would be powerless to fight back. It is worth noting that Little once had a girlfriend named Jean. They met around 1973. Jean was much older than Little and had masterful thieving skills. The two were partners in crime and naturally got together. For many years after, the two relied on theft to make a living. However, Jean died of illness in 1988. But even during this period, Little did not stop his killing spree. He would steal during the day, and at night, he would look for targets. As for Little's motive, according to his own words, when he was very young at school, he saw a teacher touching her own neck. He felt an inexplicable urge and desire, and had sexual fantasies about eliminating women. Criminal psychologists believe his motive may be related to his upbringing. He was exposed to many sex workers as a child, and simultaneously hated his mother, who was a sex worker. Perhaps this was the source of his crimes. On December 30th, 2020, 80-year-old Little died in prison. Police did not release the cause of death, but considering he had suffered from diabetes and heart disease for many years, his health was very poor. He likely died of illness. Alright, that's all for today's story. If you enjoy my videos, you can like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. That way, you won't miss any of my videos. I'll see you next time.